Thank you, Jenny. Oh, that's a bit loud. Well, what a really touching introduction. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Minister Burney, as well. Even though she can't be here, I know she had those are partly her words. I begin by paying my respects to the traditional owners here, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Thank you to Arnie Yvonne Weldon for her welcome. I want to acknowledge Tom Kalma here, other elders in the room, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and all of you. So I begin by speaking some of my language, Kapukubil Murabuai, and that means good evening, my people. Because I really believe I'm amongst friends here, I'm amongst comrades, I'm amongst my people. They're going to help us to achieve what Jenny talked about, what we did so much work. We did so much work to bring a consensus together, to bring us to a moment next year where we can vote yes. I just want to make sure that we all understand where the Uluru Statement comes from. It's not just a dialogue process that happened that led to a convention in the heart of the country at Uluru. There's such a long history to the Uluru Statement. And it begins with our people fighting to protect our country and our family in the frontier wars. That we were invaded and we did everything that we could to look after country and to make sure that we were respected, that our country, our sovereignty was acknowledged and not ignored. And then it's a history of many other statements before the Uluru Statement. Statements that, if you read them, all say the same thing. They all propose a voice. They all propose political representation. In the 1930s, the Australian Aboriginal Progressive Association, a wharfie just like I am, Fred Maynard, he was a leader of that organisation. And it led to the 1930s there, William Cooper, great leader of those times. They did a petition to the King. The 1960s, the Yirrkala Bark petitions, seeking to protect country. 1972, the Larrakia petition to the Queen this time. This is just to name a few. But all of those statements and petitions not only called for a voice, but also what was in common is that they were all dismissed and ignored. And so this is one of the lessons that go into the Uluru Statement, among many, that every time that we have had these aspirational moments where our people have come together with hope and proposed something so generous that it shouldn't be ignored, the powers that be will always dismiss it. And so that's why the Uluru Statement from the heart is addressed to you, to the Australian people. The other longer history to the Uluru Statement is, while all those statements were ignored, we established our voices. We established representative structures. I mentioned the AAPA in the 1920s, the Aboriginal Advancement League, the NAC, FCATSI. All of those voices were silenced. The one that Fred Maynard led was destroyed purely by intimidation. That the powers of those times, the authorities, they could decide where we lived, they could direct us to work without pay, they could exile us from country, they could steal our children. By 1928, only a few years after it was established, that voice was silenced. I mentioned another statement, the Barunga Statement, 1988. Bob Hawke was different to the others. He actually bothered to travel to Barunga, a small community in the Northern Territory near Katherine. And Bob Hawke promised a couple of things. He promised a national treaty, and he was unable to deliver. But he also promised a voice. The Barunga Statement, like all the others, called for the establishment of a representative body to speak to the Commonwealth. Now, what happened with ATSIC? Bob Hawke established it against the vehement opposition from John Howard. And as soon as John Howard won power, what did he do? He set about destroying it. I was a wharfie from when I was 17 years old, and I remember when I was 20, wondering why the media and parliamentarians were always bashing us, saying that we were lazy, saying that there were criminal underground activities on the wharves, all these things that I knew to be untrue. And if they were true, if they had the evidence, then they should have done something about it with the laws of the time, right? What Howard was doing was amplifying, he was softening up the Australian public to go after the MUA, my union, and then to go after the rest of the union movement if he was successful. Well, he failed with us. He failed because we were well established, because we had resources, because our union officials over many years had looked after our funds. We got through that with the support of the community because the MUA did so much more with the power that we had from our unity. We supported many different social justice struggles just like you people do. And so they turned out on the picket lines. This was the same tactic that was used against ATSIC. ATSIC was doing some wonderful things. It had its problems, like all human organisations will have. But Howard chose to amplify those problems. He demonised our leaders. He didn't assist us in the work that we were doing to improve the organisation. Auntie Jackie Huggins, a great Queensland Indigenous leader, with a couple of others, had done a review into ATSIC, and that review never saw the light of day. In 2005, that voice was silenced as well. So you can see this pattern throughout our history, that if we are to re-establish a voice, and a voice is so important, if we're going to build this thing, then we must protect it from future hostile governments. Now I ask you, as people that understand civil liberties, what happens when a people don't have a voice? Well, for my people, post-2005 and the destruction of ATSIC, what did we see? We saw the Northern Territory intervention in 2007. A Prime Minister who suspended the Racial Discrimination Act in the Northern Territory to do such a racist thing. He turned the Australian Army in against its most vulnerable citizens in those remote communities. He announced to the rest of the country that those social issues in those communities that were a result of the trauma from colonisation, from failed policies, from cruelties, he announced to the rest of the country that these were an Aboriginal problem. And we know better than ever today that where those decisions were made, such disgusting things were rife in that parliament. We saw hundreds of millions of dollars cut from frontline community services, from health, from legal services. We saw money meant for Indigenous benefit given to organisations, non-Indigenous organisations, that used it to fight against land rights. These are the things that happen when we don't have a voice. So there's a great urgency for us to re-establish the ability to influence the decisions in Parliament. This year I went to the Freedom Day Festival, Kalkarinji and Dagaragu, and I delivered the first ever Vincent Lingiari Memorial Lecture on Country. And the Gurindji people have a really close connection to the call for a voice. Because you see, I think here we all know that wonderful moment, that iconic image of Gough Whitlam pouring a handful of sand into Vincent Lingiari, the leader of the Gurindji people, after a long 9-year struggle for equal wages initially and then for land rights. And we celebrate that moment, and we should. But what happened after that moment was a whole lot of paternalism, a whole lot of bastardry. The CLP in the Northern Territory was particularly racist, and they did everything they could to sabotage the Gurindji dream. And so the Gurindji people understand that we must establish the ability to influence those decisions that are made so many thousands of kilometres away from our homes. The Uluru Statement, and Jenny talked about that moment, I mean, it was incredible, and I hope I did it justice with those words. But I think the most powerful way for people to understand how special that moment was is to listen to the words from the Uluru Statement and try to feel what we felt in that room that day. So I'll recite it. We gathered at the 2017 National Constitutional Convention, coming from all points of the southern sky, make this statement from the heart. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent and its adjacent islands, and possessed it under our own laws and customs. This our ancestors did according to the reckoning of our culture from the creation, according to the common law from time immemorial, and according to science more than 60,000 years ago. This sovereignty is a spiritual notion, the ancestral tie between the land, or Mother Nature, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who were born therefrom, remain attached thereto, and must one day return thither to be united with our ancestors. This link is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or better, of sovereignty. It has never been ceded or extinguished, and it coexists with the sovereignty of the Crown. How could it be otherwise? That a people's possessed the land for 60 millennia, and this sacred link disappears from world history in merely the last 200 years? With substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood. Proportionately, we are the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not an innately criminal people. Our children are aliened from their families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them. And our youth languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be our hope for the future. These dimensions of our crisis tell plainly the structural nature of our problem. This is the torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish, they will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country. We call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. Makarrata is the culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. We seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making between governments and First Nations and truth-telling about our history. In 1967, we were counted. In 2017, we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. That's the Uluru Statement. So those words and that canvas, you've all seen the canvas, it's not just the image, it's a physical thing, the Uluru Statement from the heart. It's about that wide and that tall. I know because I carried it around the country for 18 months in a patched together postal tube. Every time I checked it into oversized baggage, I was shitting myself as it was, I was waiting at the other end. I left it in a hotel lobby once and, went up to get dressed for dinner, and an hour later I was going back out and they said, "Hey, Thomas," because I always stayed at this hotel here in Sydney, "I think you forgot something." I almost lost it. That's why I don't have it anymore. It's at UNSW being looked after. It was getting a bit frayed because I was rolling it out on, the red dirt in Kalkarinji and Dargaragu and the Pilbara and the Lumberdina, and then from city to town to conference to forum to little office meetings, just getting it out there. Because what happened after that moment was that the government almost immediately dismissed it as predicted. This is a special day. I think, I was talking to Rita Malia, who's been a great supporter of this campaign from the CFMEU. I think this is the anniversary of one of the first big actions that we had with the Uluru Statement 4 years ago. And because it was Turnbull that dismissed the Uluru Statement, we decided to take it to his electorate. And at King's Cross there, near that LL Mine fountain, I think that's how you say it, we got a bunch of supporters together and we just started to talk to people on the streets and started to let them know just how disrespectful Malcolm Turnbull was. We took it to Cronulla as well when Morrison was the Prime Minister, and people said, "You're mad. That's where the race riots were. You're going to go and talk about something like that there?" But you know what? It was a really positive response. Not everybody wanted to talk to us, but it started to give us the confidence that if we just engage with people about this, they would say yes. The Uluru Statement started to get a bit frayed, so that's why it went to UNSW. It had done its job. At that point, we built a people's movement. We refused to take no for an answer, and in the coming 18 months perhaps, you're not going to take no for an answer either. We have, for the first time, I think, in a very long time, a visionary Prime Minister, one with the courage to listen to what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people want and take it to the broader Australian public and give us a chance to put all that reconciliation work that we've done to practice. We are going to have an opportunity at the ballot box, at that referendum, to say yes. We are a nation, collectively, all of us, with over 60,000 years of continuous culture. And that will make us so proud. It'll make our children so proud. It will be us giving them the greatest gift that we could possibly give them. I hope, going forward, Murabuai, as I said, my people, that you're going to put the shoulders to the wheel and you're going to do the work that it's going to take to win this. A majority of people for a long time have been saying that they support this, but that is a soft support. There's a lot of smart people in this room, there's a lot of dignitaries, there's a lot of people with influence. You are going to need to do everything that you can to beat our greatest enemy in this campaign, and that's confusion. So please, get out there, start working, building this campaign in all of your places, all of your workplaces, all of your suburbs, and let's win this. Because New South Wales is going to vote yes, right? Thank you.